So, we're at the point where we've kind of got our tools, and now it's time to beat up some leather. So I'm going to talk about weathering techniques. Check it out. We want to do some damage. Okay, so let's get this the back part. Okay, this is sort of the belly armor part itself. Let's get this a little bit more beaten up. Okay, now I did carefully select this piece of leather. This is 5/6 leather, vegetable tan. Now, if you look very closely, you can see already that there's some scratches in here. Okay, different grades of leather, and even different parts of hides are going to have scratches and various deformations, bites, all kinds of stuff, just because of by nature of what the leather is. It's the hide of a critter, and they get caught in the barbed wire, or they get attacked by flies and mosquitoes and ticks, and all those things mar the leather. So for a post-apocalyptic build, it's actually oftentimes better to use leather that is a little bit on the beat up side. So first we're going to keep this, the leather is going to be dry, okay, and then we're just going to have a couple tools. And again, I'm going to kind of just sort of show some techniques, and then we'll, through the wonders of editing, we'll stop and go to hit another part. So let's just take at some basic things we can do to this leather. First, one of the things we want to look at is right now the leather has a very nice crisp edge, and that's not going to happen. So we're going to want to make sure that we damage that edge some to make it look a little bit more natural. And again, there's a couple different ways we can do that. These tools are great. There's also a very specific tool that's designed to change this edge. But for now, we're going to just look at some of the more uncommon tools. So again, we've got our wood chisels that we can use. One of the coolest things you can do is, and this is going to be very kind of silly and simple, is to just use the edge of the blade like this and just scrape along. And the great thing about this is you can mess it up and it's okay, because that's the whole point. Okay, and going certain ways, depending on how the blade goes, you start to cause damage to the blade, to the leather, which is the whole point. Okay, so see how right here it's pretty smooth. Here we're getting this rough edge. All right, which with wear over time you would have. Now, the other thing we can do, and I'm going to do that in that same area, is we can make small pressure, basically pushing down with the blade, not getting the whole way through. We're just kind of making like little indentations, little cuts. All right. I don't want anything super big. Then I can scratch that a little bit, and then we can see, all right, once again, there's all those little cuts. And then if we flex the leather, all right, those cuts are going to show up even more. All right. There we go. And that kind of helps it look like it's drying and cracking a little bit. Now, I might want to take that a little bit further to simulate a sword cut or an actual nick in here. So one of the easiest ways, of course, is just press with the blade firmly, but you're not really going for any movement. You're just trying to make a deeper cut. And then right beside that, you're going to tilt your angle of your blade a little bit right beside that cut, and you're going to make like a V cut. Okay, and then you might need to go back in there to clean that out. And I find it's easy just to sort of pick it up and try to get that out. So what you're doing is you're just creating like a little V channel. You could leave that in there, or you could use a scissor, or like one of these little gouges, and try to remove the material. Now, I would do this all over the whole piece, and I will, so that then you can see that you've got like that little piece of material that's removed. Now, you don't want to do this a lot, but you could do this sporadically through the edges of the leather. Of course, the other way to do this is you could make actually a literal cut. You're going all the way through the leather, okay, and then all the way through the leather again. And then usually it's good to extend just a little bit past that first V cut. And again, you're just trying to, you just want to get that little piece out there. Sometimes you don't quite get it the whole way through. A little saw action can make that happen. And again, I kind of find that it's helpful to do some of these beforehand. Okay, so now we have an actual V cut. All right, now what you can do is you can take one of these gouges, or this is a wood bevel. This is a leather beveler. It is made to bevel the sides of the leather. Okay, so it's used like this. Okay, some of them pull, some of them push. And what that does is that actually takes the square edge and then rounds it. Okay, so kind of creates a more finished edge. Now, the idea with this belly armor is actually it's just a piece of leather that somebody found somewhere and is repurposing. But when you make these V cuts, it's good to kind of make that a little bit more worn and natural. So you get in there with either the beveler, or you could get in with one of these wood carving tools just to rough up that edge a little bit. Okay, and then the sides, and then you could of course go over that again here. You could also use, these are leather shears, but you could use any kind of pair of scissors, and you can do a very similar thing. All right, and you'll find that with blades, certain ways will cut differently, but you can create a good bit of damage. Okay, and now you can kind of see how rough I've made all that. All right, this is just typical stuff you can do just to the edges. All right, you could also consider that, well, maybe this piece of leather was attached to some other piece, and well, there would be a cut there. And maybe, or there might be a hole there from a fastener, so you could use the hole punch and punch a hole there and then rip that out. So if we were going to do that, we would take the size that we want, we would make our punch, our hole, and then we could try pulling it out. It doesn't matter that you actually successfully pull it out. It's just that you're making that kind of cut there, okay? And then you could open that cut up with the blade to add more of an effect if you wanted to. Don't forget, we also have our sanding block. This is great for adding some roughness to those edges. It's also great just to kind of, now this is fine, okay? So I don't want anything too aggressive, at least not at first. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of opening this up, and it will allow for a flatter finish. I'm taking a little bit of this upper layer off, which will be ideal when we get to the dyeing section. Of course, we have the surface. We already have some scratches and mars in here. Some things you want to consider in this case, there's 2 series of belts. So I don't want to go too crazy on the parts where those 2 rows of belts are anyway, because nobody's going to see that. So from an effort point of view, you know, I don't want to go too crazy. But I might want to make some scratches in the leather itself. Okay, so this is a flat tipped one. And it's great for kind of making a gouge, right? And then you can leave that gouge there, okay? Or you can sort of gently remove it. So then now there's an actual indentation in the leather. Okay, let's just see that real close up. Right there. Okay, so you have that. So when this dyes, this part here, this lighter part, is going to get a lot darker than the other part. Okay, so again, it helps sort of show that off. And a lot of times I might actually get in there and add some additional dye. So I'm going to do a couple more of those. So maybe I'm going to have another one down here. Here's my flat one, where I'm just going to kind of run it along, maybe give it a little wiggle. You don't want to really go through too far, because remember, one of the key things is you don't want to totally damage the integrity of the item that you're making. You want it to kind of sort of be intact so that it's it still functions for whatever it is, because you still have to get some use out of it. So, and as I'm going, and you just have to, again, think like what would happen where, um, and then I may do some of these afterwards too. So after the dye's in there to show the lighter leather afterwards. Okay. Now, some of these have more of a V or a rounded gouge. So I already got quite a few lines going this way. So I don't want to make it look too regular. So I might try some that are just coming straight. And again, you can always start on a scrap piece of leather to see how it's going to function. And if in this case we know that there are certain areas where not as much is going to show up, we can always do that there. And you can see this sort of skates across here. But again, I don't need a lot. And I want to avoid, I don't want to go too often with these straight lines unless I have a purpose. You know, maybe somebody is scratching at something and then you're trying to sort of duplicate that. So it doesn't take much. And again, you just kind of dance around the area. These rounded tools are also okay for gouging certain areas. It's because it's rounded, it's challenging. It's good when you have the sort of the start already. So those are just some of the tools that you can use to damage it. I also found that this is actually pretty effective too. You just literally drag it across and it makes a pretty good scratch. Okay, and we'll see when we get to the dyeing part. Well, how that progresses. Okay, so again, you can hit all these edges, and I mean, I kind of messed up there and kind of went over that. That's okay. That's actually let's work on that. I made a mistake. I kind of went a little crazy. All right, with that piece there. That's okay. In fact, might be kind of cool to move a little bit more of that layer, right? Well, how did that occur? Is this just rubbing? Is this something else? Maybe we want to put a little nick in there to sort of indicate that that is what started that, okay? Because maybe the individual got hung up on a piece of equipment or something happened. Now, this is something that we don't have to focus too much on the back of it, just by nature of what it is. So again, we can just sort of dance around, work around. Some things you're going to want to do to almost the whole edge, okay? Because you want some sort of a consistent effect on it. And then some things you're going to want to make a lot deeper in one area, okay? Because you're trying to get a little bit of that worn effect, okay? Now, the other thing that we can look at is we have this little tooling tool, okay? It's got little sort of like all bumpy. And you can use this tool as well to just make marks in the leather. And this will make a depression. Okay, now I didn't even wet the leather. And we can see the little mark it made. So you can imagine that either you get hit with something or there's you lean against something, and this is sort of a nice mark that sort of doesn't really look like anything in particular. So you can apply this, and apologies for the shaking of the camera, but you know that's the way things happen here. And this is going to be useful in just adding a little depth, adding some action, so to speak. Now again, I might hit these edges with some more sandpaper and with the sand. And again, I have different grades of it, so I can control that. You also have to consider which parts of this costume or this costume piece may show more than others. It's nice if you have the edge of a material that you can actually put the leather off of the edge of the material, so you can kind of adjust that angle. Or if you want to get the side of it, because the leather tends to be a little floppy, doing it like this isn't always as easy. So that's just kind of a rough overview of basically some of the initial weathering techniques that we're going to do. We're going to switch on over. I'm going to finish up the rest of these, and then we'll move on to dyeing. Hey, so we made some damage today, right? We messed up some leather and got to see that just using tools, oftentimes not how they're intended, is perfect, especially when it comes to distressing and weathering leather. Next step we'll of course approach is dyeing the leather, and this is where all the hard work that we've just done will start to really shine, because we'll get to see all those the dye highlights and enhances a lot of the marks that we made that you can barely tell. So that'll be kind of the gain, the affirmation. So often when we're working on a project, we want that instant result, and it doesn't always work out that way, because all the preparation things that we do is what will get us to that final outcome, that final goal. So knowing what those are, sometimes we just have to wait a little bit and be a little patient. But again, with practice and experience, you kind of know what's going to work. You kind of know what's going to happen. And a great thing about a lot of the weathering and distressing techniques is, even if you have dyed the leather already, you can continue to add more stuff. And if you've overdone it, a lot of times you can kind of sort of fix it with dye, and that's what we'll see next. So next segment, we're going to dye that leather. Catch you later.